Hi, my name is Elliot Warren. I'm 68 years old and I bought a condo after my wife passed just to have a place of peace. But my son sold it behind my back for $1.2 million and gave me a $15,000 check as if I were a burden he could cash out. Dad, here's your share from the apartment, Derek said, sliding a $15,000 check across the table with a practiced smile. His voice was casual, too casual. I've already sold it. I looked at the check. $1.2 million, and this was what he gave me. A neatly printed name in the bottom corner. Derek Warren. I blinked. Not in disbelief, my gut had already known something was off, but in restraint. I watched him the way his hands fidgeted with his watch band, his eyes dancing past mine toward the window behind me. This apartment had been mine since 2015. I bought it with my own money after the divorce, when I'd needed something, anything that was mine alone. No more shared spaces, no more compromises. I had rebuilt my life here brick by brick. Every bookshelf, every light fixture, every mug in the cupboard held the weight of silent victories. And now my own son had sold it without even telling me. I didn't say anything at first. Just got up and went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the stove. The water began to hiss. Behind me, Derek kept talking. The market's hot, Dad. You wouldn't believe what buyers are paying for this neighborhood. You said you always wanted to move somewhere quieter anyway, right? I poured hot water over the tea leaves, the steam curling up like a veil between us. When did I sign anything? I asked quietly. There was a beat too long before he answered. You gave me the authorization. Back in 2022. Don't you remember? Of course I didn't, because it never happened. Derek leaned forward, elbows on the table, speaking faster now, as if momentum would legitimize the theft. You said it yourself, keeping the place in my name would help with the taxes. You trusted me, Dad. I stared at him. Not angry, not yet, just studying. Like watching a chess player reveal his opening. I see, I murmured. Then I stood up. Give me a moment. I left him in the kitchen and walked into my bedroom. The door clicked shut behind me. The air was still, and the quiet let the sounds of my own memory return. I knelt before the old safe in my closet, spun the dial with the same care I'd used 100 times before. Click. Inside was the envelope. Heavy paper, cream-colored, handwritten in black ink, original deed. 2015. I opened it slowly. The title deed still had that sharp, almost industrial smell of printer ink. My signature, my real signature, was there. And tucked beneath it, copies of various documents I'd kept over the years, including one from Derek, a letter granting him access to help me with the property taxes. But nothing more. No authorization to none. Then I found it a copy of the authorization Derek had submitted to the title company. My name forged. Almost perfect. The curves matched my handwriting, but not the pressure, not the small breaks between strokes that only muscle memory knew. I made a copy, not because I intended to confront him today, but because I understood something now. He hadn't come alone. Lindsay wasn't here, but her fingerprints were everywhere. Derek never made bold moves without her, and she hadn't even bothered to show up, only sent a text earlier that morning. Just accept it, Elliot. It's better for everyone if you don't make this hard. Better for whom. I returned to the living room. Derek stood when he saw me, looking expectant, like a boy waiting for approval after breaking something and calling it a gift. I didn't say anything, just walked over to the mantelpiece. There in a ceramic bowl were a few mementos, an old cufflink, a rusted key, and the charred edge of a ring from a fire long past. I slid the check into that bowl right beside the broken things. I didn't burn it. I didn't rip it up. I simply left it there among the ashes, because I knew I needed something else. They forged my signature and sold the apartment as if I were already dead. That's what I told the lawyer. No emotion, no drama, just a sentence, like reciting a mistyped figure from an old ledger. Natalie Reed across the polished mahogany desk didn't flinch. She just clicked her pen, ready to dissect the lie. Rain tapped against the wide windows of her seventh-floor office. Outside, the Seattle skyline blurred in mist. Inside, the silence was dense, intentional. Natalie wore a sharp-collared blouse the color of rose quartz, no jewelry, just a watch and a steel glance that read everything. I laid out the original deed on her desk, the one I'd taken from my safe. Then I placed beside it a scanned copy of the authorization Derek had submitted for the sale. Both bore my name. Only one was mine. She examined them without speaking, flipping the page with her left hand, taking notes with her right. Finally, she leaned back. This document, she said, tapping the fake authorization, went through a third-party title processor. That's why it wasn't flagged. They never verified the signature. And the notary, I asked, likely complicit or lazy. I didn't respond. My fingers traced the ridge of the envelope I'd carried in. She continued. I'll need to file an injunction to put a hold on the disbursement, but we're late. The funds may have already been wired. I nodded. Then we traced the wire. Natalie arched a brow. You've done this before. Not exactly, I said, but I know what ambition smells like when it's rushed. She almost smiled. Almost. I'll handle the filings. You'll need to sign an affidavit swearing the signature isn't yours. Then I'll pull title communications from the brokerage side. I'll pay you up front, I said. All 6 months of retainers. She glanced up from her legal pad. You don't need to win with money, Mr. Warren. I met her eyes. I'm not paying to win. I'm paying so no one interrupts me while I plan. She looked at me for a moment, measured, then wrote something quickly on the edge of her notes. I like that, she murmured. Clear lines. After we finalized the paperwork, I stepped out into the cold again. The rain had picked up. I didn't open an umbrella. Down the block outside a parking garage, I spotted a familiar face lean, frame black cap sleeves rolled to the elbow, despite the cold. Carlos. He used to wash my car before Derek took it. He saw me first. Mr. Warren, man. It's been a minute, I offered a short nod. Still detailing cars, he shrugged. Moved inside. Got a buddy working at Thompson Realty doing admin junk. I help sometimes. Side cash. That caught my attention. You ever hear of a Sarah Young works paperwork, fast? Carlos frowned, then snapped his fingers. Yeah, Sarah B. Something. Blonde short, always rushing. She handled a file for my buddy last week, some urgent condo transfer. I slipped him a card with my number. Let me know if you hear anything else. Pictures, emails, whatever. Quietly. Sure, he said, pocketing the card. Anything for you, Mr. Warren. You were always cool with us. That night around 11, Carlos texted me a photo. It was grainy clearly from a phone, but the scene was unmistakable. Sarah seated between Derek and Lindsay at Hillstone, laughing, toasting something. The timestamp read just a few hours earlier. My hands didn't shake. I simply stared at the image, the clean arc of her smile. They weren't just celebrating the sale. They were celebrating silence. My silence. I forwarded the photo to Natalie. No caption. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. She's in the photo, Natalie said. She is. Good. She doesn't know we have it. Don't make noise. Let them keep thinking you're just an old man blindsided and harmless. Her voice was calm, cold, focused, just like mine. I've lived through market crashes and product failures. I've seen balance sheets bleed. One thing I've learned, money doesn't disappear, and it damn sure doesn't appear out of nowhere. I spent the morning at my old bank branch, familiar lobby, now manned by strangers who didn't recognize me. That suited me just fine. I wasn't here to reminisce. I was here to follow the scent of $1.2 million. Natalie had helped trace the sale through an intermediary escrow account. From there, the funds split into two. $750,000 to $1,000 went to a clean property title under Derek's name. The remaining $450,000 vanished. Except it didn't. I sat in my apartment that afternoon, pen in hand, charting the flow. I've mapped product ecosystems more complex than this. I knew how people hid assets when they thought they were clever. Escrow, Holdings Corp. Shell vendor listed as Reform Real Holdings. I called Natalie. Reform Real Holdings, she repeated. That name rings a bell. Give me a minute. 10 minutes later, she called back. Lindsay Warren. She was listed as the HR director there until last year. The company's dissolved now, but that doesn't erase the paper trail. I felt no satisfaction, just confirmation, the kind that gives you silence instead of relief. Later that week, I met Ethan Granger for coffee at a corner cafe in Ballard. He was the only person I trusted with raw data. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since he was pushed out of Cascade Bank for misuse of internal systems. The truth, he had kept copies of every major transfer he ever processed. Not out of malice, out of habit. He sipped black coffee, no sugar, same as always. You're not just here for a catch-up, are you, he said. I'm trying to unwind a laundering thread. Private but sensitive. Lindsay, he asked. I didn't answer. He already knew. I still have access to some snapshots. Read-only backups. I keep them, in case someone needs to fight fire with facts. You were always better at cleaning up messes than creating them. He chuckled. What's the angle, Elliot? You looking to take them down? I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in restoration. That money doesn't belong to them. It was laundered through a company that no longer exists. I want to document the path clean and indisputable. He paused, then nodded. You'll use it right. I'll use it when the time is right. He handed me a flash drive in a small envelope. No passwords, just ethics. I took it. No handshake. No promises. That night, Natalie and I went through the files line by line. One transaction stood out. $450, $1,000, transferred 3 days post-sale, from Reform Real Holdings to a personal account held by Lindsay. The account used a trust cover, basic, clumsy, but it worked when no one's watching. Natalie leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. They didn't even bother hiding it properly. This isn't just fraud, it's tax evasion too. Can we use it? Oh, we can, but once I file this, they'll know we're watching. She turned her monitor to me. I can have the complaint ready in 2 hours. Filed by midnight. The agencies will move by next week. I said nothing. Natalie tapped her pen against her notes. Then she asked the question I'd been expecting. If I file this today, they'll feel it. The question is, when do you want them to feel it? Outside, the streetlights glowed amber. The world moved slowly, but we didn't. When greed clouds their judgment, they forget who taught them how to cover their tracks. And they certainly forget I still have the blueprints. Natalie stared at the folder in front of her, the one Ethan had decrypted, cleaned, and labeled for distribution. You're really going through with this, I nodded. It's not a press release. Just pressure. Let them sweat. She smirked. You have a talent for understatement. 2 hours later, the files were divided into digestible fragments. No direct accusations, no names, but enough financial irregularities tied to Reform Real Holdings to make any compliance officer twitch. Natalie uploaded the batch anonymously to 2 major legal forums. One catered to estate litigation experts. The other a more aggressive whistleblower board known for triggering internal audits just by speculation. Neither post mentioned Lindsay, but the dots were close enough for anyone familiar with the real estate sector in Seattle to connect. That afternoon, I messaged Lindsay. Lunch just to clear the air. You and Derek deserve to hear my side, too. No drama, just closure. She agreed in less than 10 minutes. That told me everything I needed. Hillstone Cafe, the same place Derek had once taken me for my birthday. She arrived in a power suit, eyes calculating. I was surprised you reached out, she said. We've all been under a lot of strain. Exactly why I wanted to talk, I replied calmly, pressing record on the pen resting by my napkin. We're still family. That matters. She smiled, sipping her tea. You've always been reasonable. I told Derek this would pass. Did you? I tilted my head. I'm still confused, though, about the paperwork, the sale, the names on the deeds. Who handled it? Oh, you don't need to worry about all that. She laughed softly. You never liked the admin stuff. I took care of it. Even the brokerage contract, I signed that myself. You were too stressed at the time. I kept my face neutral. Let her speak. She leaned forward. Honestly, Derek was going to talk to you, but you seemed so out of it. It just made sense to handle things quickly, efficiently. The pen blinked once. Recording complete. That night, Natalie scrubbed the audio, enhanced the clarity, and drafted a formal complaint to the State Real Estate Oversight Board. Not a lawsuit. Not yet. Just a petition to suspend Lindsay's license for investigation based on conflict of interest, unauthorized transactions, and verbal admission of fraudulent conduct. By morning, an envelope landed at Lindsay's inbox. Subject notice of temporary suspension, pending investigation. Duration 60 days. No fanfare. Just enough to knock her off balance. And then Ethan made his move. On a popular real estate law forum, a new anonymous post appeared. Reform Holdings, possible conduit for undeclared transfers. The IP was hidden, the metadata scrubbed, but it didn't matter. Within 12 hours, the post had 50 comments, 3 moderators asking for further clarification, and 1 anonymous tipster linking it to an inactive company that Lindsay had once worked for. That evening, Lindsay called Derek. I didn't hear the words, but Natalie got the summary from a paralegal friend who worked at their firm. Her tone was frantic. This could bring him back into this. Derek, you told me we were done, that everything was airtight. They don't have anything on us, he replied, but even from a secondhand report, it was clear he wasn't sure. Back at Natalie's office, I looked at her across the desk. They're unraveling, she said. And you haven't even played your strongest card. Exactly, I said. I glanced down at my notes, handwritten, methodical. A timeline of everything they'd done. Not for revenge, for precision. They just started to feel the edge, I said quietly. But they still think they're in control. Let them. The most terrifying thing isn't an old man yelling. It's a father who turns away in silence with the truth in one hand and undeniable evidence in the other. The city clerk barely looked up when I handed her the request form. You said March 5th, 2025, room B12. Yes, I said. She tapped a few keys, then passed me a small USB. Security footage from the day of the transaction. No editing, no audio, just timestamps and faces. That was all I needed. Later that day, Natalie played the video in slow motion. The date was clear. So were the faces. Sarah, Lindsay, and Derek stood before the counter, exchanging papers with a notary. No sign of me. Natalie pressed pause. This is damning. Not enough to convict, I said, but enough to raise questions. Enough to subpoena, she corrected. And so I continued the quiet march. At a small office near Woodland Park, I visited Harold Denton, a park administrator who'd refused to sign a release form for a neighborhood land exchange unless I appeared in person. You still remember me, I asked. Of course, he chuckled. You're the guy who showed up with homemade muffins just to get a paper sign. Why I need a statement. Confirming that on the day I was supposedly at the property office. I was with you finalizing a form for that small land plot near the duck pond. He blinked. You mean the one where we talked about old jazz records? That's the one. He nodded. I'll draft the letter. 2 hours later, I had it dated, signed, and notarized. Next, Sarah. She hadn't been responding to Natalie's inquiries, but when Reform Real Holdings called an emergency meeting, she showed up clearly rattled. I waited in the hallway. When she exited, I approached quietly. Sarah. She froze. Mr. Warren. I'm not here to threaten you, I said. I'm here to ask one question. Her eyes searched mine, unsure. The day you processed my consent, were you told I'd given power of attorney? She hesitated. Yes. Do you have a copy? She bit her lip. I was shown a scan from Lindsay. She said the original was filed already. I nodded. That scan matched this. I held out a copy of my original deed signed in 2015. Compare the signature. Her eyes widened. She didn't speak. That's all I said. I'll let the court handle the rest. By the evening, Natalie had drafted the civil and criminal filing, forgery, exploitation, fraudulent transfer of real estate from a mentally competent individual under the guise of incapacity. She looked up from her laptop. It's tight. Very tight. If we file tonight, it hits the docket tomorrow. Hearing scheduled within 7 business days. That night, a quiet storm rolled in. Not thunder or lightning, but headlines. Seattle man discovers 1.2 home sold without consent. Legal questions mount. The story didn't name names, but it quoted court filings, referenced the footage, and cited inconsistencies in the transaction records. Online forums exploded. If this is real, that son and daughter-in-law need to be in jail. Who lets a house sell without the owner's presence? Elder abuse isn't just nursing homes anymore. It's family. The tide had turned. By morning, Derek was calling Natalie. I want to talk, he said. We're willing to return some of the money. Not all, but enough to move forward. Maybe we can keep this out of court. Natalie put him on speaker. I answered, you used my name like a tool, forged my signature like a checklist. Now you want diplomacy? Dad, listen, I'm not your father when it's convenient, and I'm not your obstacle when it's not. You made me a stranger. And strangers talk to lawyers. There was silence on the line. Then he hung up. Natalie turned to me. That was brutal. No, I replied. That was clarity. She glanced at her calendar. We're 7 days from the hearing. I'll be filing requests for witness subpoenas and asset freeze orders tomorrow. I didn't speak for a moment, just stared out her office window watching the rain. They have no more shadows to hide in, she said quietly. I nodded. Let's turn on the lights. Truth be told, I never needed to win. I just needed them to lose the right to call me father. The hearing room was colder than it looked on the live stream. Not because of the weather Los Angeles had its usual August heat, but because justice, when it's finally summoned, has no room for warmth. I sat at the petitioner's table, not flanked by family, but by evidence. Natalie beside me, a small stack of files to her left, her voice sharp and precise. On the other side sat Derek and Lindsay. She looked hollow. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just finally stopped seeing him through the lens of forgiveness. The presiding officer began. We are here to determine the validity of the property transfer from Mr. Elliott Warren to Reform Real Holdings, as well as assess potential abuse of elder rights forgery and fraudulent misrepresentation. Natalie stood. We'll begin with mental competency. Exhibit A doctor's report signed, dated and clear. I was of sound mind at the time of the alleged agreement. Exhibit B, the supposed power of attorney, poorly scanned signatures, inconsistent, lacking proper witnesses. Then the footage. The time-stamped video from the city records played on the screen. There they were, Sarah, Lindsay, and Derek, their backs to the camera, papers handed over, forms signed, no Elliott Warren. Natalie, your honors. My client was not present. His signature was replicated. His consent was faked. And the transaction moved forward with full knowledge of his absence. The room was silent. The clerk's pen stopped moving. The air stiffened. Lindsay shifted, whispering something to Derek. Then a new voice spoke. Excuse me. Heads turned. Sarah stood at the back of the room, a folded paper in her hand. I was the agent for the sale. I was told by Lindsay Hale that Mr. Warren had approved the deal. When I asked to speak with him, she said he was ill. When I hesitated, she threatened to report me for negligence and have me blacklisted. She handed her written statement to the board. I regret not doing more. Lindsay's face flushed red. She's lying, she was part of it. Quiet, the officer snapped. Then Derek, desperate. My father gave verbal consent. He just forgot. He forgets things all the time. Ask him, he won't remember half of this. I stood slowly. If I truly forgot everything, how would I still have a notarized copy of the original deed? The one you tried to destroy, I didn't look at him when I said it. I didn't need to. Silence again. Then the verdict, the property transfer was nullified. Ownership of the condominium reverted to me. Derek and Lindsay would be referred to the Attorney General's office for investigation under elder abuse and fraud statutes. A formal complaint would be filed with the Real Estate Commission regarding Lindsay's professional misconduct. The state's Department for Elder Protection would assess their eligibility for future fiduciary responsibilities. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters hovered with cameras, but there was no applause, no cheers, only silence. The kind of silence that respects, not celebrates. I stepped down the marble stairs past the murmuring crowd into the heat of the city. Dad! I turned halfway. Ethan jogged up out of breath. His eyes were glassy. I'm sorry, he said, for not standing up sooner, for letting them do that. I didn't reply. I simply placed a folded piece of paper in his palm. He opened it. Never sell your father for a condo. Then I kept walking. I didn't need a trophy. I had my name back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.